Hey, how's it going everyone? It's me, it's Jinsula. I hope you're having a good day and welcome to today's Pokemon Go video. Okay, so this weekend we are going to see the debut of shiny Shadow Mewtwo in Pokemon Go. And in order to get this specific Pokemon, you will need to do Shadow Raids, and it's going to be extremely difficult. I'm going to be telling you how you can defeat this raid boss in this video, so let's roll the intro and get right into it. Alright, let's dive right into it. So, when Niantic announced that Shadow Raids were coming to Pokemon Go, they stated that the first legendary Shadow Pokemon raid is going to be Mewtwo. And of course, they also gave the announcement that the shiny form of this Shadow Pokemon would also be available. This is pretty big news because shiny Shadow Mewtwo is the dream for most Pokemon Go players. But Niantic gave the warning that this is going to be one of the most extremely difficult raids that you will ever do. Shadow Mewtwo is going to be no joke. Even though it's going to have a nerf to its defense stat, it is going to have a much higher attack stat, so you will want to make sure you bring the absolute right counters, otherwise your entire team could get completely wiped out. And considering that this is a Shadow Raid, you will need to bring a couple of items and a couple of key things that will give you the advantage. But real quick, let's go over all the stats and what those counters actually are. Alright, Shadow Mewtwo is going to be a pure Psychic type, which means it's only going to have weaknesses to Ghost types, Dark types, and Bug types. It will be resistant to Fighting type and Psychic type attacks. Make sure you avoid bringing any Pokemon with Fighting type attacks or Psychic type attacks, because they are going to deal very little damage against Shadow Mewtwo. Now, if you're looking for the perfect IVs, you will want one that is 2387 and 2984 if it is weather boosted. It is going to be weather boosted by only one weather type, and it is, of course, windy weather. Now, let's talk about how many trainers you will need in order to defeat Shadow Mewtwo. First and foremost, it is extremely difficult compared to most other legendary raids, so make sure you're bringing the most amount of trainers as possible. I highly suggest you go with a total number of 8 trainers that are at least level 35. But if you want to defeat Shadow Mewtwo with the least number of trainers as possible, you could probably do it with about 5 trainers that are at least level 40. And make sure all of them are bringing the absolute best counters. We'll get more into that later, but next, let's talk about Purified Gems and why they are so important. First and foremost, Shadow Mewtwo is a Shadow Raid, which means Purified Gems, which you should be collecting by defeating Team Go Rocket leaders and grunts, will actually make a huge difference during this raid battle. Occasionally, Shadow Mewtwo will enrage, and when it does, you will want to use this item because it will calm that Pokemon down. The key thing with Purified Gems is that you will want to use as many of them as you can against this raid boss. I highly suggest you stock up on as many Purified Gems as you can. Ideally, if you could bring the max amount of 10, that would be the most ideal, especially if you plan to do multiples of these raids. When Shadow Mewtwo enrages, you should use your Purified Gems at that moment. If you can stack a bunch of them, that would be great. Make sure you coordinate with your raid mates to use as many Purified Gems as you can. It's going to make the raid boss a lot easier to take down, so that is something you should keep in mind. I would say in preparation for this weekend, you should try to get as many Purified Gems as possible. That means you're going to need to do as many Team Go Rocket grunts and leader battles as you can, considering that it takes 4 shards in order to create one of them. And that means you're going to need to do a lot of grunt battles in order to get enough Purified Gems to go up against this boss. Alright, now that I got that out of the way, let's now talk about the best counters for Shadow Mewtwo. First and foremost, the Mega Evolutions you should consider bringing is of course Mega Gengar, Mega Banette, and Mega Houndoom. Either of these Pokemon are going to be extremely good against Shadow Mewtwo, but of course, Mega Gengar is going to be the major standout because of the amount of DPS it can unleash. You will want to be careful, however, because if that Shadow Mewtwo raid boss is packing a Psychic type charge attack, it is going to completely wipe out your Mega Gengars. So make sure you have a Mega Banette or a Mega Houndoom on hand, because you may want to switch to either of those Mega Evolutions if Shadow Mewtwo is running with Psystrike. Now, aside from these Mega Evolutions, you will want to bring Shadow Mewtwo with Shadow Ball. That is of course because this Pokemon deals an insane amount of DPS, and it will resist a lot of Shadow Mewtwo's hardest hitting attacks, like Focus Blast, Psystrike, and Psychic. However, do consider that the Shadow Mewtwo raid boss might come with Shadow Ball, which is going to be extremely devastating against your Shadow Mewtwo's. On top of that, Shadow Mewtwo is extremely expensive to power up, so unless you have one that is already maxed out, you could probably go with the other Pokemon that are listed as the best counters. Speaking of which, that is going to be Hydreigon with Dark type attacks, and of course, Giratina Altered Form with Ghost type attacks. Now, let's say you do not have a good collection of legendaries at your disposal. Well, you could probably go with Chandelures instead, and those are actually pretty common and pretty easy to power up. So that is a very solid counter you can bring if you are relying on budget counters. And this is going to be an underrated counter that you could bring. Goldango is actually pretty good up against Shadow Mewtwo. As long as all of your Goldangos have Ghost type attacks, then you're going to be very effective against Shadow Mewtwo as a raid boss, so that is something you should definitely consider. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Shadow Mewtwo Raids is going to debut with its shiny form as a possibility. We do not know exactly what the shiny rate is going to be, but if it's going to have the same rate as other legendary Pokemon, then it's going to be 1 in 20. So make sure you plan to do as many raids as you can in order to pick up this shiny Shadow Pokemon. It is definitely going to be highly coveted, and it's going to be one of your best shiny Shadows in the game. Alright, there you have it. This was my guide on how you could defeat Shadow Mewtwo in Shadow Raids. Of course, this is going to be extremely difficult, so make sure you bring the right counters and bring enough trainers, because you will not want to miss out on this special raid weekend, because we do not know when shiny Shadow Mewtwo will be available again. This will be a prime opportunity for you to pick up this Pokemon, and considering that Shadow Raids have an IV floor of 6, 6, and 6, that means you will have the best opportunity at getting a Shundo of Mewtwo in preparation for Mega Evolution. So yeah, that is something you should consider, and you should do as many of these raids as you can. But don't forget that Shadow Raids are in person only, so make sure you coordinate with a bunch of your friends and go to highly populated areas so that you could do as many of these raids as you can. But in any case, that's going to be it for this video. Now, let me know your thoughts regarding this Shadow Raid in the comments below. Are you excited to go up against this boss, or are you someone who lives in a rural area and you feel like you're going to be kind of screwed out? Definitely share all of that down below, and let's have a great discussion. And if you ended up enjoying this video and found it to be helpful, make sure you hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if it's your first time here. And don't forget that little bell so you can stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. And I want to give a quick shout out to my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to support my channel in any way, big or small, then do consider checking out the links in the description below. For all my patrons, they of course get a permanent spot on my in-game friends list. So if you want to interact with me in some way, like with remote raids, then do consider joining me on Patreon. Yeah, that's going to be it. Good luck everyone on this special raid. I am Count Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you all later.